The youth kids were making fun of my shoes in my office, so I said, give them to me. I'll wear them when I preach. I don't care. So for those of you that didn't get to see, right? So I got light up shoes because I'm 15. So so I'm going to kind of do this a little bit different than Brother Mark did. We talked a lot about worship this week in Purpose Driven Life, and we talked a lot about what that means, and we talked a lot about how that works and what that kind of looks like. And for me, I looked at it in a little bit different light, especially with the day 2, I think, about Noah. And that's going to be where we're at. We're going to be in Genesis chapter 6 through 9. Don't worry, I'm not reading the whole thing, so I don't miss my commas or whatever. So we're going to be in Genesis, and we're going to just look in totality of the story of Noah. And the thing, in order to live the way that it kind of described this week of being in continuous worship, starts with obedience. And it starts with an obedience that I think the church of today really struggles with, really in some ways can't comprehend, and for me personally is kind of hard because we don't have to be as obedient, so we think, than that they used to be. So we're going to look at the whole story, and then I'm just going to pull out some scripture to things that I thought really pushed the thought process of obedience is required. And that's kind of what see, I've been hanging out with Brother Mark too much. I got to come up with sermon titles for everything now. But obedience is required is kind of where I just think it always starts. And the thing that we see in Noah is the immediate response. And we kind of, for the most part, in here, we know the story of Noah, and we know the state in which the world was in, and God is getting ready to, God is done with humanity. We've really screwed it all up, and we're done, and he's getting ready to kill us all. And then the first thing that he recognizes is a standout. And that's the very first thing that stood out to me when I went over this, is that we as people of God need to be a standout. If you look at chapter 6, verse 8, that's what God says. It goes through and it talks about in verses 1 through 7 about how corrupt the earth is, and we see in here in verse 5, the Lord saw the wickedness of a man was great in the earth, and every intention of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. But then in verse 8, we see a difference. But Noah found favor in the eyes of the Lord. Amongst all of the chaos, amongst all of the evil in the world, Noah stood out. And a lot of times in our world today, if you walk about, do you recognize Christians standing out very much? Probably not. And so, to me, I think that this is the starting point of us being different from the world. The world is all about, right, I've heard this in the youth room, you do you and I'll do me. And that's kind of how the world's thought process is you do what makes you happy and what makes you feel comfortable and how you feel about doing stuff. I'll do what I want to do, and we'll just not talk about it, or we just won't be friends, or we won't whatever. And instead of being that way of whatever you want it to look like, be the one that says, hey, listen, I know that we don't agree on stuff, but I still love you. The world today doesn't go, oh, hey, we're different, but I'm going to compromise and we're going to talk about things. The world would just say, listen, if they don't fit in to your life or to your thought process, just get rid of them. And in order to stand out, that's the first thing, in my opinion, that you got to do. You have to stand out in the way that you think, right? And a lot of times, the things that we come across people with is like the agenda, right? Is kind of what it all is. Race, religion, political, sports. Like if you're a Texas fan, just get out, right? Texas Tech is okay, but it's close. But we have these things that we're like, listen, if you believe that and I believe this, we cannot be a part of each other's life. You can fit in whatever agenda you want it to be, whichever one's important to your life, but that's not the root of the problem. The agenda isn't the problem. Verse 5 told us what the problem was. It's the heart problem. And we seem to always think that, well, that person, if they would just change their mind about fill in the blank, then we could just get along great. Not as Christians, that's not always the case. In order to be the standout, how about even though that person's an atheist, how about you just love them anyway? The kids will know kind of who I'm talking about, and if you went to Falls Creek, Renee is like the prime example of that, right? And I'm sure you guys have heard me talk about Renee, but Renee is a girl who, the first time I picked her up on the school bus, or on the van bus, like I was scared for my life. She, like the black, like that black color of that speaker right there, that's the color of clothes and makeup that Renee wore. Slipknot hoodie, big black eyeliner, her nose pierced, and I was like, who invited this chick? And I remember her telling me, hey, listen, I'm an atheist, and the only reason I'm coming is because I heard that you guys have food. And she came the next week, and the next week, and the next week. And the next thing you know, we're a year and a half into her coming, and my daughter's born on Thursday. I drive back down to Falls Creek on Friday morning, and I'll get to be a part of leading Renee to Christ. And I've talked to her later, and I was like, why did you keep coming? She was like, you guys just loved me. That's the standout. See, because that's the difference that we have as Christians. We have to look at this world around us in God's eyes. And the example that I really was pushed to was 1 Samuel chapter 16, chapter 16, verse 7. And it says, but the Lord said to Samuel, do not look on his appearance or on the height of his stature, because I have rejected him. For the Lord sees not as man sees, but looks on an outward appearance, but the Lord looks on the heart. And that was during the time that Samuel was going to find David to be the next king of Israel. As Christians, in order to be a standout, you got to love on people, and you got to be willing to look at the world from God's perspective. Now, when we start doing that, just like Noah stands out, when we start doing that, God's going to present us with opportunities. So the next point that I want to look at real quick is just simply yes. Yes. And this is the next step Once we learn how to love people, once we learn how to be different, now God's going to present you with opportunities to do stuff. If you look at chapter 6, verse 22, this is right after God has given Noah all of the feet, cubits, and all of that stuff that we're not going to have time to get into, but gives him the blueprint of the ark. It wasn't Moses, Sarah. But sorry, I had to poke and prod. Somebody, never mind, group chat. But this is right after he gives Noah the blueprint of the ark, and by the way, it hasn't rained on earth ever. He's far enough inland that there's absolutely no way he's ever going to get this massive boat to the water. And God says, hey, just build it on dirt. Just right here. We'll just build it right here. And it's going to be this big, huge thing. And I'm going to bring enough rain to float this thing and all this stuff. But in verse 22, it's very simple. Noah did this. He did all that God commanded him. Noah did it. And when we look at that, sometimes, and I'm going to use myself as an example, sometimes that's even harder than learning to be obedient. I was actually supposed to be going to Puerto Rico in 3 weeks. I was going to go on what the North American Mission Board calls a vision trip, where like leaders go down to a place and you make contacts with church planners or places that need help for a mission trip. And I was going for a possible mission trip for us as a youth to go in 2023, to go to Puerto Rico. And for those of you that don't know, I have never been on an airplane in my life. And I have a very deep theological thought process on it. If God wanted me to fly, he would have given me wings like an eagle, but he never said, you shall mount up on wings like humans and soar. Like, that's not what he said. But I have never been on an airplane. And I was absolutely freaking out at the thought process of not only, Riley, to get on an airplane, but to be on an airplane for like 8 hours. And that really freaked me out. And not only be on an airplane, go over the water, which for another one of you, I don't swim. Again, theological thought process. If God wanted me to swim, I'd have had fish, gills, and scales, and flippers. Like, I didn't get that stuff. So all of this is going through my head, and I had been talking about it for like a month and a half, and I'm sure all of the staff was like, I wish this kid would just shut up and quit talking about Puerto Rico and either do it or not do it. And I finally get the gumption to do it. And it was on a Thursday, and I literally get Bob out of his office. He's actually working. And I get Bob out of his office, like, would you please come sit with me while I buy my plane tickets? To just like help me, since like you've been on more plane rides than I'll ever get on, hopefully, in my life. Would you just, and like, he didn't do anything. He just sat there and was moral support for me to buy it. And I do that, and I go get my first round of my COVID shot, and I'm doing all of this stuff to get ready for this Puerto Rico trip. And once I bought my ticket, and I knew I was going to go from Tulsa to Dallas to Puerto Rico, and then on my way back, I was going to go Puerto Rico to North Carolina, and then to Tulsa. Like, we had it all figured out. I go eat lunch with my wife, and no joke, I get back from my lunch, and I have an email. Your trip to Puerto Rico by the North American Mission Board has now been canceled. I walked down to Bob's office. I said, you are never going to believe the email that I just got. And they all thought it was hilarious. They laughed. Bob and Sandy and Mark, they all thought it was hilarious. They laughed so hard. But Brother Mark said, God was just wanting to see if you just do it. He never had any intention for you to go. He just wanted to see if you would just say yes. And when we come to that act of obedience and come to the thought process of just doing it, right? Like as Baptists, you know the greatest line to not do it? My youth kids know because I say it all the time. I'll pray about it. I'll pray about it basically is saying, I really don't want to do it. And if I pray about it long enough, maybe people will get off my back. Or maybe I'll feel less convicted about not doing it. Now, don't get me wrong, prayer's great. In order to be in complete obedience to God, you have to have prayer. I'm not saying don't pray, okay? I'm not. But sometimes we will use whatever we can to get out of saying yes, because it just pushes us outside of our comfort zone. Planes, water, not my comfort zone. Snakes, not my comfort zone. Like, just don't, no. Also, theological thought process. Satan was a serpent. Didn't say what kind of serpent, so just don't like any of them, okay? Just say yes. Noah just said yes. There's multiple times throughout this 3 chapters that Noah says yes to stuff that I'm just like, I don't think I would. Don't think a lot of us would. I think that that's a big thing with the church, is we've gotten so content with keeping the inside happy that when God presents us with a opportunity outside, that we'll pray about it. I'll do it all the time, especially when it comes to pushing my boundaries. Give me Falls Creek, give me Super Summer, give me 50 youth kids playing gargoyle, putting a game day together. Give me all that. How about you get on an airplane? No. We'll pray about it. We've got to just be willing to just be obedient and just say yes. And then once we finally say yes, we get to see the awesome part of it all. And then this third one was just God takes care of the details. And we're going to read verses 11 through 24 of chapter 7, just because to me this is the part that in verse 15 is what we'll really kind of get into. But chapter 7, verse 11 says this: In the 600th year of Noah's life, in the 2nd month, on the 17th day of the month, and on the day all the fountains of the great deep burst forth, and the windows of heavens were opened, and rain fell upon the earth 40 days and 40 nights. On the very same day, Noah and his sons, Shem, Ham, and I practiced this name all week. Yeah, I call him Japheth. I can't say these names. Japheth and Noah's wife and the 3 wives of his sons with them entered the ark. They and every beast according to its kind, and all the livestock according to their kind, and every creeping thing that creeps on the earth according to its kind, and every bird according to its kind, every winged creature. They went into the ark with Noah, 2 and 2 of all flesh, in which there was the breath of life. And those that entered, male and female, all of flesh, went in as God had commanded him. And the Lord shut him in. The flood continued 40 days on the earth. The waters increased and bore up the ark, and it rose high above the earth. The waters prevailed and increased greatly on the earth, and the ark floated on the face of the waters. And the waters prevailed so mightily on the earth that all the high mountains under the whole heaven were covered, and the waters prevailed above the mountains, covering them 15 cubits deep. And all the flesh died that moved on the earth, birds, livestock, beasts, all swarming creatures that swarm on the earth, and all mankind. Everything on dry land in whose nostrils was the breath of life died. He blotted out everything living that was on the face of the ground, man and animals and creeping things and birds of heavens. They were blotted out from the earth. Only Noah was left and those who were with him on the ark, and the waters prevailed on the earth 150 days. God takes care of the details. He tells Noah, build this boat. Noah says yes. Never did we ever read anywhere that Noah asked God, so how are we going to round up all these animals and get them on the boat? Some of you have worked cattle. I have done it myself. Sometimes getting one stupid heifer to get her head in the hole to go down the chute is the most Christian push of patience in your life. You will beat that cow with a rod. No, I'm just kidding. But we understand how hard it is just to work cows. Now, imagine 2 of everything. Noah literally didn't have to do anything. He built the ark, he obeyed God, he said yes, and God took care of the rest. And a lot of times I think that when we look at a job as a whole, we get way too concerned about the non-important stuff. Like we were talking about the people going to Panama. They're just going. And if you talk to them about money or COVID or anything like that, all of them, God will take care of it. It's not a big deal. God will take care of it. It's not a big deal. I would be worried, oh my gosh, what if we get over to Panama and then something happens and we can't get back home? That's where my head goes. They're all it's whatever. Whatever happens, happens. God takes care of the details. But how many times, and this is for me, right? And my Falls Creek people will understand this. We have a meeting every day just to kind of go over how everything's going and what's going on. And, I give them the layout of the day of how it's all going to go. And then they'll all tell you that it never goes that way. Ever. Never, ever, ever. We have a moment, where 7 or 8 guys are talking about somebody getting saved in the guy's bathroom, and we literally took our shoes off because we're this is the greatest place since the burning bush. Because we had 3 people get saved and 1 person tell everybody that he got saved for the first time. In a bathroom, because the way it was set up was you walked into the guy's dorm, and the bottom floor was the bathroom and the showers. Then you walked upstairs, and it was up in where the beds were. And we were literally standing at the bottom of the steps, and it was me, Ethan, Austin, Preston, Caden, other Ethan. There's 7 or 8 of us, and started with a group of 3 of us, just one person telling me that they got saved, and then somebody came down the stairs and they say, I need to do that too. And then it just kept happening, and then we finally get out, 2 people just got saved in the bathroom, and heck yeah, this is a good day. And somebody goes outside, gets somebody else, looks at me and goes, hey, we need to go back to the bathroom. I had a whole thing planned for that time that we were going to be doing that. Didn't matter. God's got the details. We just have to be willing to say, okay, this is obedience, doing God's will, living in God's will the way that we need to be. And then when God gives us an opportunity to say yes to something, we just do it. And we have to think about the thought process that goes into that. Because here's the thing, and this is was my big bite, which the youth kids will know, but my big bite of this week was God gives commands, not if you want tos. God gives us commands as Christians, not if you want tos. Look at Acts 1:8. If you want to, go make disciples. No, go therefore and make disciples. Above all, if you want to, love on people. No, go love on people. Most important thing is love. Everything that we have been given is a command, not a if you want to. And we've got to get better at understanding what the difference is. Because until we do that, this country will never see revival again. Because we as Christians refuse to be standout people in our workplace, at our schools, at Mazzio's, at Hammond House, wherever you go. We can't be at the bars Friday and Saturday night and then come to church on Sunday morning and act like you're different. You can't be sleeping around with whoever you want throughout the week and then come to Sunday school and act like you're different. You can't have a mouth that not only your mother would be ashamed of, but God especially, and then come to church on Wednesday night and act like you're different. Because then you're fitting in, not standing out. And until we make a stand and decide as a church to stand out and not fit in, nothing's ever going to change. Because God doesn't make you do anything. People who are obedient, say yes, and let God handle the details are the ones that God uses to bring change. So my question to you tonight is very simple. Do you stand out? The answer to that is yes, you do. The second half of that question is, what do you stand out for? When people look at you, what do they say that you are? Oh yeah, they're a good guy. Trey's a good guy. Cool. A lot of good people went to hell and are going to hell. I want people to say, here's the thing I know about Trey. I know that his grammar was terrible. I know that he stuttered a lot when he spoke, and he acted about 15 years younger than he was, and was the most immature 31-year-old I've ever met in my life. But man, he loved Jesus. And every single time he got a chance, he wanted to talk to you about it. That's what I want. If I ever get that compliment in my life, if anybody ever says that about me, I might have actually done something with my life. Because then I'm standing out. I'm going to ask everybody to bow your heads and close your eyes. Tonight, for the first time, you might need to stand out in a way that you've never done before. And that is to simply give your life to Jesus and to say yes for the very first time. Because until you say yes to Jesus, everything else that I just talked about is absolutely not possible. People that don't know Jesus can't love like a Christian. They can't understand Scripture the way a Christian can. They can't hear God the way that we can. They can't do it. It's impossible. Just like we talked about this morning, it all comes from one Spirit. It all comes from God. And if you don't have Jesus Christ as your personal Lord and Savior, you can't have it. It's just the way that it is. In just a second, I'm going to say a prayer, and Brother Mark's going to be standing at the front. And if you need to make that decision for the first time in your life, the best way for him to get to come back to church would be to talk to you about it. It'd absolutely make his day. If you're a Christian that just needs to come up and pray or sit down and pray where you're at or whatever and say, God, I don't stand out. I fit in. God, help me stand out. Brother Mark would be happy to pray for you about that. Or you pray about it yourself. Come talk to me. I'd love to talk to you about it. But I'm going to pray, and then our invitation hymn will start, and Brother Mark will be up here to the front. You just come talk to him. Heavenly Father, I come right now, Lord, I just thank you so much for this time. I thank you so much for the opportunity to get to just talk about you. Lord, sometimes I think that I take that for granted, and I don't think that that's part of standing out. But God, if I can't stand out here, where else am I going to? Lord, may we be a family here at Memorial Heights that stands out. That when people hear about who we are and where we go to church, they say, oh yeah, you go to that church. That church that loves people. That church whose youth kids are involved in FCA and doing that kind of stuff. That church that has people in the community loving on people. Lord, may we be a church and individuals that stand out for you and are obedient when you tell us to go and say yes. And just let you handle the details. Lord, tonight, if there's somebody here who doesn't know who you are, I just pray that you just show up and show off. Lord, I thank you so much for this church and for this family. For all these things in your name, amen.